Hi, Joe here over at woollycottage.com. Right, it is storyteller time for March. What a predicament we've got here, ladies, because for some reason people put down crocus and there wasn't any crocuses on there. On the list this week or this month was butterflies, geodes, tulips, hummingbirds and spring flower. Okay, so I ended up with 2 crocuses, 1 Carinacean. Have no idea what that was supposed to be, Mary. That's really bonkers. Right, 1 geode, 1 butterfly, 2 hummingbirds and 2 spring flowers. Now I did state at the end as well, before all the results were in, that I was going for the hummingbird, because I think it's only fair that I put a vote in, because we end up with this scenario every time. So we're going with hummingbirds this time round, ladies. I do apologise. I've taken over because you didn't pay any attention to the list. There wasn't any crocuses on there at all. There were spring flowers. Maybe that's what you meant. But there you go. That's the picture image that was up on the Storyteller Bats this month. Okay, so we've got this purpley grey, which I've got the perfect grey downstairs for that. Then we've got a really soft peely wally grey, which I have got some lovely bamboo fibre that I can use for that. Then we've got this really dark blue, and we've got this purpley heather colour, and we've got a bright fuchsia pink or amethyst pink, olive green, and this soft sandy colour. So I'm going to do something a little bit different this time, because how many of you have ever over dyed coloured wool, as in the natural colour? Now I tend to use it if I want to dye a darker colour, but I want it to be really quite dark and rich inside, so I tend to go with a darker wool to be able to do that. So like if I had, say, a Shetland Moor wool roving, and because of the darkness of the brown, I quite happily put a black dye over the top of that, because it will come out truly dark. So that's what I tend to do, and I've gone for the breed. Now the video is not going to be massively long on the Dyepot scale of things, so I thought what I would do is give you a little bit of a breed study at the same time this week, because I'm using Faroe Isle or Faroese wool. Okay, so I've got some lovely brown natural Faroese wool, and I have got the light grey. So I've looked up some information, and I tell you what, it's a really interesting breed. So go and do a Google search for Faroe Isle wool. I'll put the name of how to spell it, just in case you're not sure, because if you put in Faroe Isle, sometimes it comes up with Fair Isle, and it's a completely different thing altogether. Okay, so Faroese wool contains more lanolin than lamb's wool. It's a hardy sheep that lives on rain-soaked mountainsides for months on end on the island of Faroe. I've written my notes down, so bear with me. I'll pop some pictures up as I'm talking. The rams are horned and they weigh between 20 to 41 kilos, and the females are polled and they're 20 kilos. They were first introduced onto the island in the 9th century, and it's long been argued that the Faroe Isle island name, the Faroe part of the island's name, derived from the fair, the Old Norse word for sheep. But it's depicted on their country's coat of arms are sheep on there as well. It's a northern European bred short-tailed sheep, small and hardy breed, very much how I depict a Herdwick sheep. The fleece colours are naturally different. There's 300 different combinations, and each one of those colour combinations have their own unique name. They don't have any predators, so they don't instinctively flock on the hills and stuff like that. They just roam off free on their own, or with whoever they feel like their best friend is this week. The Herdwick sheep are very much similar. You'll always see them spotted around certain areas when we go up into Wasdale or Ennerdale, and they roam around the place quite freely, and they're just, I suppose, organic sheep. So they're very similar to our Herdwicks here. I'm not really sure of many other mountain breeds off the top of my head. Liz, correct me on that one. Are they very similar to being able to free roam around the place and don't actually herd? I'll have to maybe look that up for next time when I do this. They're closely related to Norwegian heritage sheep breeds of the Palsan and the Icelandic sheep. So during the 9th century and early 20th century, the Scottish breeds were introduced onto the Faroe Isle to help with the production of wool and just bring it up a notch when it comes to what we would class as a micron count now, to make a better produced wool, resulting in some Faroese sheep being mixed breed, but majority are actually purebred sheep. Now, their main import or export of the commodities for the Faroe Isles is wool. Okay, so they produce wool products is their economic income, and the jumpers during the Napoleonic Wars were exported to the Danish army. Several thousand were exported every single year. In the 1600s, they could use wool products to pay for their tax bills as part of a currency. So yeah, so like if you hand knitted wool socks, you could use that to pay your land taxes back then. I wish we could do that today, folks. Honestly, I would figure out how to knit socks till my heart was content and pay those bills every year. The Royal Danish Monopoly received 100,000 handmade sweaters, 14,000 pairs of socks in 1849, and at that date there was only 8,000 people living on the Faroe Isles, and that's how they paid their tax in that year in 1849. So what else? The Norwegian army, the infantry, should always wear Faroese sweaters underneath their uniform. There's a little known fact. Ull for a gull. I've probably annihilated that. But the wool is a phrase that was always used. Ull for a gull. Wool is Faroese's gold. And this phrase is still used to this day to coin a sarcastic phrase at the fact that wool's not worth anything anymore, whereas generations ago they could barter for food or pay for work to be done by giving jumpers and sweaters and things like that. So the sheep itself are 2 layers. You've got the underlayer, which is the fine part of the wool, and that's lanolin rich. And the outer layers are traditionally been used for heavy outer garments, your jumpers, especially for fishermen and early Arctic explorers would wear Faroese sweaters. So the staple length of Faroe Isle wool is 9 centimetres to 10 centimetres long, but it's got quite a high micron count, so it's 34 to 36. So definitely a hardy wearing jumper outside, but then you could weave with it, spin it, weave it, and then make it into a blazer or a coat or something like that for yourself for outside. So that's what I've got with that. So I've got the brown Faroe Isle, the light grey Faroe Isle. You can get them from World of Wool. They've got 4 colours on there at the moment. I think one's dark grey and there's another colour. It might only be 2. I can't quite remember. But they come in loads of different colours naturally anyway. And then I'm going to soften that down with some fake mohair fibre, so I can dye up a couple of rich colours that I can blend in, and even the grey in there as well, and add that in, because where it's got that beige colour at the bottom, which is supposed to represent the nest, I'm going to do this in the natural of the Faroese wool. Okay, so I'm going to stick that to one side, and that's going to be my base layer for this, because majority of that picture on there is straw. So I'm going to use this, and I do this now and again. I use a natural wool and blend it with merinos or Shetlands that are already been dyed at the mill, or use my own dyed wools and add them in. And because I'm trying to do the blend sets as well, I will probably dig out from my stash, because there's a couple of colours in there that I can actually use. And then there's a new wool product, blends on World of Wool at the moment. I'm not advertising for them. I swear I do not get paid by them, but they are one of my main suppliers. So a lot of the stuff I get, you can get from them. So this wool at the moment, this one's called Little Wren, and it's a 25% merino, 25% Blueface Leicester, 25% viscose wool blend, 12.5% bamboo and 12.5% flax. And I'm going to dye with this because it's all natural. So I'm going to be dyeing this in my highlight colours, which is the olive, and the bright green and the sort of heathery purpley sort of colour. That's what I'm going to be doing with that, and I will be doing that with that one as well. So yeah, so we're going to get on with this, go down the stairs. It's going to be quite a quick dye pot session because I'm dyeing them as solid colours. I'm not doing wishy-washy colours with these neither. I may even end up adding in some Angelina into this. So I have got this one at the moment. It's called Sugar Plum. And I have got some greeny coloured. Greeny coloured. It's green, Joe. It's not a greeny colour. It is green. Green Angelina as well. So I've got this one here, which will help with the highlights in there. And it does have, even though it's got olive on here on the chart, I can actually see other colours, and there's an emerald green in there, which I'm sure I've got some emerald green in here. I do actually in fact have some Tussy Silk blended merino. Yeah, I've got some of that, so I may add that into the highlight just to break up these stronger tones. And then I've got this really, really dark navy blue, which in actual fact, let me just check how much of the brown one. I've got 200 grams. So if I take 100 grams off of this, and I'm going to dye this a really dark blue, I think I might. And then the natural grey, light grey one, I will go with a darker grey and do, yeah. So we'll figure it out when we go downstairs. I'll split them all up into groups of 3 so we can get these 3 bats all done, and hopefully potentially some blend sets. Okay. So I hope you enjoy this video so far. Remember that you can actually hit the like and put a comment in down below on these videos, even though they're for you to watch and only you can see them until I release them in 6 months time, if that's what I end up doing. Yeah, so it really does help on the algorithms. And don't forget, it's Q&A time as well. If you get those put up there, any questions you've got, 1 question per person, please, 2 at a max. I'm getting a couple of people putting 4 or 5 questions in, because I've got to film it and I've got to come up with all the information. So if anybody does put in multiple questions in a comment, I will pick 1 or 2 out of those to answer, because it takes a while for me to get it done, and I don't want the videos being too long. So you can always save that question for another time if you're really keen. Yeah. So anyway, I better go off and get this done and stop nattering, Joe, and drink my coffee before it gets too cold. I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so we're downstairs and I've pre-soaked everything. Now, I've split all the wool that I had up the stairs. I had 200 grams of the brown, 200 grams of the grey, and 50 grams of the little Wren blend, and I think it was 50 grams of the faux mohair. Okay, so everything's been soaked. Now, I split them up because we want to try and, we wanted to today dye up these coloured wools, but also use some of the coloured wools in the actual blends. So I've separated the packs up into 3. I split the wool up in all the fibres and everything else into 3 sets, because 3 colourways from 1 image, and we'll show you what I'm going to be doing. I've got the blend, the faux mohair and the grey in a pile. I have got both the brown, the grey, the faux mohair and the blend in 1 pile, and a brown, the blend and the faux mohair in another pile. And I've put aside 1 grey and 1 brown for putting in with these, the ones that are missing. Okay, so I've just pulled out all my dyes that I'm going to be using today, and we're going with, to get the dark blue, I'm going to be using a dark grey, just a dash, just to bring down the brightness of the blue that I have got available, which is like a navy blue, and I needed it a shade darker. So when you're dyeing with you, when you're wanting to create a darker shade, always make sure you've got a nice selection of different shades of greys available to you. Don't use a black, because black doesn't always do what you want it to do, because it could have a red base or a magenta base or a purpley magenta base underneath, which means it'll turn your blue into more of a purple colour, and that's not what you're looking for. Grey's a really good safe bet, and find a really good grey, true grey pigment from your dye suppliers. I'm using, to bring down my grey now, Wilder will have a really lovely grey, and I love using theirs, and I always keep forgetting whenever I do a stock order to order in their grey dye to use as my darkener in my pigments. But I'm using the Dharma Set dye Grey G, and it's a dye lot DM hashtag 011415. That is the coding for Adina's Home of Crafts if you're looking for those, okay? And I'm using a Adelaide Walker blue dye, which I actually think is an Ashford dye. I'm using a fluorescent pink. I have got an amethyst pink over there as well, but I want to have a little play with the neon. I've got a lighter grey for the grey on the picture, which I'm using Tornado Grey. Another Adelaide Walker olive green, because I like their olive green. I can't find an olive green anywhere else that I actually like at the moment. And for the purple, I'm going with my lilac, because with that, if I want a true lilac colour, then I only use a little bit, but when you use quite a bit, it gets the right shade of what I'm looking for. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. And I've also written down what wools I'm going to be adding into each dye pot colour. Oh, and I've also got a fawn. I need to hump that out, actually. I'll use olive brown and just use a little bit of that, and that should give me the pastel colour that I'm looking for. So I'm going to be dyeing a light grey Pharaoh on fawn, a light grey blend and a faux on olive, a blend and a faux on the fluorescent pink, a light grey and a blend in the lilac purple, the dark brown, the brown one I'm going to be using in the dark blue, and a brown on the grey. So let's see how this goes. I may end up just going darker on the grey and going with my G-set grey dye. We'll see how it looks afterwards. It might not get the shade that I'm actually looking for, but this is the whole point. It's all about your interpretation, and I want to create 3 different bats using the same colourway from this picture, in case that's the picture you want to be influenced with, and you've got enough stash in your wheels to mess around with your dyes and just chop and change the way that it can actually look and be influenced by how you blend it together. So that'd be really interesting for you to try this one this time at home. Okay, so I have got my large stock pot. It's half full. This is a 10-litre stock pot. I'm sure it's a 10-litre stock pot. It's my large one anyway. And it's half filled with water, and it's got about, I don't know, about 5 grams of citric acid in there, and it's just simmering away now. It's not bubbling, it's not rolling, and that's how I like my dye pot to be. It's on my largest ring, but on the lowest setting on there. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit boring, but you see me doing it. So I'm going to go with the olive brown, and I'm just going to say I want a fawn colour. I do have a fawn dye in my tubs, but I'm not going to go rooting for it because I do have some brown to hand. So if I just use less is more, and see if I can get, because it's quite a dark brown, this olive brown, so if I can get the softer version of that, because it's half a tub, and it'll saturate into the wool really quickly. I just need to grab my tongs. I'll just give that a swish around, and I can see it's just in so colouring my water, and I'm looking for the grey in that one, just the natural grey on its own, and I'm going to plop that in, and I can see if I'm getting the right colour that I'm looking for while it's in there. I can always add a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit more just to colour the water a little bit, because there's not much dye in there and it will saturate quite quickly. So I'm going to put in less than what I put in to start with and sprinkle that around. And when you're dyeing, you want to use just a little bit at a time and build up the colour for what you're looking for. Because if you put in a lot of the dye, then you can't take it away, can you? You can always add to it if you do a little bit at a time. And you're lucky if that was half a gram that I've put in with this dye water. It's gone a little bit more browner, which is what I'm looking for. It's not as grey, but I think I was still putting a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's just about right there. Quite happy with that. As long as it tints the colour of the wool, That's all I'm looking for. I just want to take away that sort of oatmeal-y. I want to get more of an oatmeal-y colour on this wool. So we're just going to get on with that and let that do its thing. There we go. You can't quite see the colour that it's going to produce, but it will be a darker version of the grey that we had. Okay, so I just have to wait about, I don't know, about 5 minutes or so for the dye to saturate into that wool. And then we'll get on to the next colour. Okay, so now I'm going to get my blue and I'm going to add about, that's probably the equivalent of about 1/2 gram of dye into there. I'm just going to go with a tiny bit more. And I'll just get some tissue and I will show you what it looks like now as to what it's going to look like later. So I'm just going to get a piece of tissue and I will dunk it in the dye stock. I'll just give that a swizz around. And this way I can look to see if I think it's going to be dark enough for what I'm more looking for or strong enough. I may want to add a little bit more. So that's the colour I've got at the moment. I'm going to stick that to one side and I think I'll add in a little bit touch more blue. Because I want it to cover the brown. And it takes a few moments for the dye pigment to melt in the water anyway. That's why you need the heat. Right, let's see if that's a darker shade. Pop that back in again. Yeah, a bit more bolder on that one. It's not as wishy-washy this time round. Okay, so I'll put that to one side. And then I'm going to add in some of my grey. I've gone for a darker grey because I want a darker, bolder pigment, but I don't want it too grey that shows through more than the blue. So I'm just going to pop in a bit, give that a swizz around. I'm only doing a little bit at a time until I get the right sort of balance to what I'm looking for. So again, get a piece of tissue, okay, just a normal snot-nosed tissue. Right, that I don't think is going to be bold enough, so I probably need to add a little bit more grey into that because it's still a lot more blue than it looks. Add a bit more grey. As I say, you're best doing it a bit at a time. That way you can actually see what colours you're coming up with. It's getting there, a bit more grey. There's a little bit at a time and you're building up the depth of the colour. And take note as well, if you're wanting this for future reference, if you find a shade that you really like and you've got a limited supply of dyes to work with, there, we're getting to it now. So we're getting a lot more darker, so I think I'll add a little bit more grey. And if you can get some little jewellery digital scales. I do have some around somewhere, but you can never find them when you need them. I'm forever changing and moving my room around, so I can never find anything. But they will actually weigh under a gram, so you can take note of it. Otherwise, just use a dedicated measuring spoon that you use all the time. This one says a pinch, so far I've used the equivalent of 1.5 pinch of a spoon. So if I wrote that down, knowing which spoon set that I use for measuring out my dyes, then I've got a record of how much I put into it against the blue. And the blue I put in 2 pinches. This now is at 1.5 pinches of the dark grey. So we've got that dusky blue. I'm just going to look to see what it looks like now, and we're definitely getting there into the more darker version of what I'm looking for. So I hope that helps you with your experimenting of dyes. So we went from these blues into that darker blue, and look how dusky that is. That's where it helps you with. It helps you bring up those tones and give it a more in-depth colourway. And you really only need a basic set of colours, and then using a colour chart you'll be able to base that colour theory from there. So I'm dyeing over the brown, and I'm going to put that into my water, and this will probably come out a really dark blue. I would presume. So I'm just going to wipe up my mess in here. And I'm just going to bring up the heat a little bit on there, and then we'll let that do what it needs to do. It currently looks grey, but you've seen on the tissue the colour that it was coming out at. A lot more deeper in the blue. Let's see. Look, that's that brown gone that really dark deep blue that I needed, which brings that even more of a darker shade than what I had on the tissue originally. So we're just going to let that saturate into that now. Faux as well. So I'm just going to pop in some of this faux fibre, because it's got to be a dark blue as well, according to my little chart. And you can see there the colour it would be on white. So we're just going to let that sit in that pot, and they'll both dye there together. Okay, so the next colour I'm going to go with is the grey. And because I'm dyeing it on the brown, I've decided I'm going to go with the darker version of the grey more than the lighter version, because I want it to over dye that. So I'm going to go in with my Grey G. It's a very quite strong pigmented dye, and it will take a little while longer to saturate. So I'm going to add this in, and I'm going with a good old pinch and a half on here. Give that a stir. I can always add to it afterwards. So get my brown for Ossie Wool, okay, and plop that straight in. Give that a few minutes to sit there and soak into that water, and it might just get the right shade that I'm looking for. But I don't want to put too much of this dye in, because it takes a little while for it to saturate away. It's really, really strong, and I want my water to be clear, because I'm trying to do it all in one pot, which is the general theory of how I work. Is I like to, if I'm going to do my dyeing, the dye pigments that generally tend to hang around a little bit longer, or very rarely if you put too much dye in, which is turquoise. Fuchsia's a little swine for that as well. Yeah, the bolder, they're more of a pure dye than they are a mixed colour dye, which is a lot of some dyes are made up of 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 even colour pigments all mixed together to get the colour that they're looking for the name or the colour dye pot that you've ordered. Some colours are very, very pure and only made up of either 3, 2 or the actual one itself. So turquoise, a few years back, I think it was during COVID, because of the restrictions on flights and importations because of the COVID bans, turquoise was really becoming a very sought after dye, because it's really hard to get a hold of because of the way that it's made. And there was panic stations for quite a few dyers, the fact that we couldn't, it was looking like we wouldn't be able to get any turquoise dye. Fuchsia is one of those colours as well, and if you've ever experimented with any of these colours, magenta is the one you want to go for. Fuchsia really can strike the dye stock, and you can't get rid of it. So if I'm ever using those sort of colours, I make sure that I use that at the end. Partly so I'm not using up a lot of water. I'm not going through tons of my citric acid, and the fact that if I can do it all in one pot in one session while I'm here, even better. So I tend to, because I've worked with these dyes for so long, I tend to know which ones strike really quickly, which ones I need to spend a bit more time on, and which ones are going to completely knacker up my pot later on that I have to replace it with fresh water and citric acid and start all over again. So there you go. So let's have a look at this grey. Yeah, it's a dark grey anyway, but I think with the colours that we're going to dye to highlight, I think it'll work really well. At the end of the day, your picture images are only there to sort of inspire you along to come up with creative colour combinations for working with. And I can always mix this dark grey with a natural grey. Well, yeah, the dark grey because it's on brown, so I can always mix it up with a natural grey in my blending, and then add pops of colours in with it. Why not? You don't have to follow the colour chart in the way that it's laid out. The whole object of me referencing these colour charts is when I'm not feeling like I'm having like brain fog and I don't feel inspired by something I've seen outside, um, especially recently with the winter months, you end up with a bit of a stalwart. So by referencing the images and just putting a coded word, colour combinations to go with olive green, then you can find these pictures, and then there may be something in there that sort of inspires you to put different colours in together, give you a different perspective. So I'm going to wait for this, okay? I won't let you wait for me and me waffling away, but I'll catch you when I'm doing the next colour in a minute. Okay, so I'm going in with the lilac now. Now the water still has a little tinge of the grey in the water. It's clear to look at, it still has a pigment, which is perfect because I don't want a really lilac-y, girly purple. I want more of a dusky purple tone. So I'm going to add in my lilac now, and I'm adding with this into the pot the light grey Pharaoh wool and a blended wool. So I've got, again, a pinch spoon of purple in there, and I'm going to go in with another half into there. I'm going to add in my grey wool now. There we go, see? I'm going to add that in now and let this get this purpley hue that I'm looking for. And then I'm going to reach out for my blended wool that's soaked. I'm just going to let that plop in, and that can dye in there as well. There's a lot of dyeing wool in here, isn't there? It's all dyeing, it must have man flu. Right, so I'm just going to let that do its thing, and there's not much really to talk about. And I'll catch you when we get on to the next colour, which I'm going to go with the olive. No, I'm going to go with my fuchsia. No, I'm not going with my fluorescent pink yet. I'm going to go with my olive green first. Then I'm going to go with the fuchsia pink, because the fuchsia pink, the fluorescent pink, it will stain my pot. But I can always pull out another little pot anyway that I use for doing small levels of dyeing. Yeah, so I'll catch you in a bit. Next, olive. So I don't need a lot of olive green because all that I'm dyeing in this one now is a blend and a faux. So I'm going to just add in a little bit of olive green. Just a tiny take. It's really quite strong. I'm going to get a little bit of tissue, and we're going to have a look, see if I've got the colour that I'm looking for, if it's going to be the right shade that I need. No, it's too wishy-washy, so I do really need to add in some more. There's not much in there, so I do need to add in a bit more green. I don't want to add in too much because I want to add in my fluorescent pink afterwards, and I really need this to be quite bold. But if I don't make sure that I put too much in, I want to make sure I don't put too much in, because otherwise it'll only penetrate so much of the fibre and be left with a dirty bath, and I really don't want a dirty dye bath. There we go, that's a lot better. I'm quite happy with that shade. Okay, but if I put too much in, as I say, I'll be left with a shade in the water, and I want it to be as clear as possible, so when I add in the really bright neon pink, it's going to really strike really bold and neon pink. So we've got the blend, and we have got the faux fibre. I put them both into the pot. They're striking really quickly, so that's always a good sign. If you feel like it's not striking quickly and you want to try and get all of that stock out of there, add a tiny bit more citric acid. Sometimes that helps as well to dilute the dye pigment out of the water and strike into those fibres a little bit more intensely. That can sometimes help. Other things for trying to get wool to clear out your dye bath so that you're not pouring it down the sink still with dye pigment in there, is to just get some scraps of wool, or you might have some trilobal somewhere that's not been dyed up. Throw that in your dye pot. That can help pull out those colours out of there, so you end up with a clear bath afterwards. Just a little tip for you there. Okay, so now is the fuchsia, and this one is definitely one of those that you want less is more. It is a fluorescent fuchsia, so it is glow in the dark. It is a neon dye. Okay, it is light reflective under a black light. And I shall give that a swizz. We'll have a look at the colour and see if it's the colour that I'm happy with. So piece of tissue again. There you go. I think a little bit more because this water's going in the sink afterwards anyway. Or I may use up the last of the dye pigment that's in there with a wool that I want to dye up for this week's stock, which actually is probably what I will end up doing. So happy with that. So again, another blend and faux mohair straight into there, and that's going to take a few minutes to do that, and I will show you the end results of these dye colours in the tray. It will take till tomorrow for it to dry up, so I will show you the actual results of those when we get round to doing the storyteller bats. Okay, so there we go. We have the light dusky lilac, there's the blue with the grey that we did with the mix up, there's the fawn in the background, there's the brown overdyed in the blue, the olives that we've just done. The greys come out really dark, more of a charcoal grey. I'm happy with that because I think that'll look nice when you mix up some bold colours on top of it. And then you've got the fluorescent pink, which has come out really bright on the faux fibre, in comparison to on the blended one. But that's all right. That's the whole point. Just have a mess around with it. So a little tip as well, if you want to, you can wait for your pot to cool right down that you've had citric dye in. Get rid of the colour pigment if there's still any in the water with a little bit of scrap wool or something like that, and just simmer that up and until that all practically saturates. Get yourself a teaspoon and go into the water, and if it looks really clear, that's as clear as you're going to get that water, okay? If it's got the tiniest tinge of pink or turquoise or whatever it is that you've been dyeing with in there, just the tiniest, you can see it but it's not showing in the clear glass or whatever it is that you use to take a sample of water. Now once you get to that point, get some bicarbonated soda, just some out your kitchen stock that you use for baking with, add in a teaspoon of that. That will help neutralise that pH balance. Then you can pour that down your sink quite safely, especially if you've got septic tanks. Still quite used in this country quite a lot. Otherwise, let the water cool right down anyway, as you would do to room temperature. And if you've got any hydrangeas out in your back garden, or begonias, or there's another one that was brought here from the Indies years and years ago. Oh, it'll come to me. Or pine trees or something like that. Anything that likes acid water, because of the rules against peat-based soils and compost now, especially in the UK, and I think in parts of Europe as well, we can't get the acid content that some plants need. So use that in your water bucket. If you've got one water bucket that collects rain, have another one put to one side and use that from your dye stock, and just let the water cool down, and you can use that on your plants outside in your garden. Not a problem, okay? Anyway, that's me off for now. I hope you enjoyed this video today. Don't forget Q&A as well this week. Yeah, and I will do the blend video for the art bats this Sunday, so that'll pop up Sunday or Monday, hopefully Sunday. All depends on my schedule, probably Sunday. Anyway, take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you soon, and enjoy.